On this episode of Locked On Lightning, we continue our talk on a rumored Lightning deal in the works. We talk about why it makes sense, why it's the right time, and the possible reasons for some pushback, as well as the next captain of the Tampa Bay Lightning. All that coming up and more on Locked On Lightning.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Adam Tanker. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Locked On Lightning. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On this episode of Locked On Lightning, we're continuing a conversation from our previous episode in which we discussed a rumored deal that the Lightning may be involved in. We talk about that as well as why it makes sense, why it's the right time to do it, and why some people might object to it, as well as wrapping things up with some captain talk. Who do we think should be the next captain on the Tampa Bay Lightning? Before we grab any of those topics, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube, so go ahead, subscribe to that channel. Hit that notification button so as soon as the newest episode drops, you'll be notified. So on the previous episode, just to refresh everybody's memory, we were, I think really the previous two episodes, we were discussing a rumored deal from a Twitter account that, yes, that up until then I have never heard of this person. It was a Twitter account that is verified. Then again, nowadays, who could really take that seriously? But it was a Twitter account that said that the Lightning were in talks with the Anaheim Ducks to go get to make a deal in which they would get Frank Vatrano. And we spoke about on the podcast how that is a deal that I would make. I mean, with some things tweaked. If you want to go back and listen to the details of all of that, go ahead and do so. But there was discussion in that trade, or at least in the rumor trade, and in that episode as well, as Nick Perbix going there, Ethan Gauthier, and then a couple of draft picks for 2025, all for Frank Vatrano, which really, on the surface, not a good deal for the Lightning. I mean, it's a good deal in terms of getting personnel, but for what you're giving up, I don't think it's worth it. Vatrano has 1 year left on his deal, as well as he's going to be 31 this year, so there's that as well. A lot of you objected to that with the reasoning that we just got done becoming a younger team, and I totally get that, and we'll talk more about that as the pushback. But I thought it's at least what you're getting back. Not talking about what you're giving up. Vatrano is a guy who's coming off a 37-goal season, who could really play a two-way game, has a ton of experience, and is hungry to win a championship. And him playing in Tampa Bay and kind of anchoring that third line, or even that that third line, if that's really based on the premise whether or not Paul and Cirelli get moved up in the order, that would be a good fit for the Lightning. I went a step further with all that and discussed how maybe the Lightning should try and go get maybe somehow work Trevor Zegras into that deal. A lot of you came out and said that Zegras, the Ducks have no interest in going in trading him, which I thought was very strange, considering it's kind of been really very much talked about throughout various media outlets. That the Ducks and Zegras were kind of sort of in agreement that it just hasn't worked out in Anaheim for him. It could just be a matter of just not being able to fit there. And so, they were exploring possible deals in which they could move him. Something that, I think it's one of those situations where if that's really the case, uh, uh, really, I think it's going to be one of those things that we won't see really be done. Maybe not even until the trade deadline. Who knows what will happen with that situation? Sorry, I can't talk today. That situation, considering where he was drafted and what his upside could be and how young he is and how much money he's making currently, all that stuff. I said, why not? Because you're bringing in, yes, Vetrano, who's in his early 30s. You're bringing in Zegras, a guy who is just has a ton of potential to lead your young core for the future to come. You put him on the same line, or at least he's in the same cornerstone building with Connor Geeky, and I think that's a phenomenal kind of start. And I don't understand why a lot of people would be objected to that idea. Obviously, when you break it down with the logistics of how a trade would work, I get it. And like I said, we'll talk about all that in the second segment. But I don't understand the pushback from a lot of Lightning fans. Listen, we've been discussing over at least the last year, or even we could go as far back as a couple of off seasons. The Lightning really, they've just been kind of shedding players because of cap constrictions, picking up players here and there. Really nothing phenomenal. And we've talked about it extensively here on the podcast, really for the last couple of seasons, as well as how the Lightning have no really top young talent coming out of Syracuse anytime soon. I mean, you do have supporting players that maybe could evolve into something that, eventually down the line could be something of depth players at least. But at the same time, you don't really have a guy that is really can be the next big thing on your team. That's why the Lightning went out and got Connor Geeky. That's why they're hoping so badly, I feel like, to a certain extent, that Isaac Howard is going to be everything that the hype is going to be or is around him. And I understand why stop there. If you have a chance to go and get a guy like Zegras, who, like I said, it's kind of been talked about for quite some time now that or at least rumored that he might be moved out of Anaheim. I don't understand why all of a sudden a lot of people are objecting to the idea of that. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be Zegras, but the point is really here is that the Lightning need to be aggressive, and the right time to be aggressive and creative and really go for it in terms of not even making your team better in the short term, but also in the long term is now. I also look at it this way. Yeah, the Lightning acquired some draft picks this past offseason and, earlier in the season, and that was great. That's phenomenal. You're restocking. But if the current goal is to be a Stanley Cup contender and beyond that, how much of value are those draft picks really going to be to you? If the end goal here for the next 5 years at least is Stanley Cup, and you're going to be going for it every single year, wouldn't that capital be best spent on a deal in which you could get someone that not only is here for now and can contribute now? A guy like Zegras, I think in the right situation, could be a phenomenal player, and he has shown sparks of that out in Anaheim. But a guy that could really be one of your leaders on the ice and off the ice down the road, I'm talking 10 years. I mean, the guy is 23, 24 years old. It's wild, how young he is. So I don't understand why there are some Lightning fans in this bizarro world where it is very obvious and has been very well known for quite some time now. The Lightning don't have a lot going for them in Syracuse. The players that are going to be coming up that will most likely be playing from Syracuse this year aren't going to be playing on the second line. Maybe not even on the third line. And that goes for the defensive pairings as well. Any guy, any defenseman that comes up from Syracuse, I would be shocked if they're on the second line. That means someone is injured or multiple players are injured, or you made a crazy trade where you got rid of a couple of guys. I mean, even then, still, wouldn't it make more sense to go get a guy, like I said, that could play on the third line, even potentially the second line? You know, there's not that question mark. We kind of already know what he's done. And I'm talking about Vetrano and Zegras. So I don't quite understand the pushback, but we'll still talk about it. I'll still make the case for all of you. I totally get it. I'm playing both sides here. So stay tuned for that coming up in just a little bit. We'll talk about that. But first, we're going to talk about one of today's sponsors, and that is our friends over at Game Time. Now, it's summer. We don't have a lot of sports going on. We got baseball, though. The Rays are playing well, I think. My Mets are starting to kind of turn it around, and the weather is starting to kind of cool off here in New York. So, you know, I'm hoping to get out to the ballpark. And when I go to the ballpark, the only app that I use, whether it be tickets for baseball games, basketball games, wherever, comedy, theater, musical, whatever, I only use Game Time, because Game Time is an amazing site. They have last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guaranteed. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They have last minute deals. You could save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They got these flash deals. You could save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of your game or your event. You also have the lowest price guarantee, or they will credit you 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. So as always, I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. If you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form. We're also available on YouTube. Go ahead and subscribe to our channel there. Comment below this video. Tell us how you're feeling about possible, even if it's not a Zegras deal or a deal involving the Anaheim Ducks, I think that it would be very prudent of the Tampa Bay Lightning to explore a deal in which you sort of kind of get the same thing for what you got with Connor Geekie from Utah. As for who, I'm going to leave that up to Julian Brees-Boss. I mean, like I said, I've said this before, where the trade market right now is a little weird, because it seems like to me we got past the flurry with free agency. Teams are still kind of trying to figure out what they need, what's the best fit. And I really think that right now it's just all 32 teams are kind of looking at each other and trying to size each other up and figure it out and see what they could possibly get, not only out of the free agent market, but as well as the trade market. And I think one will really dictate the other in terms of, how much a player or how much a team gives up. And really, at the end of the day, as it usually does in these type of situations, it really depends on the question, how desperate are you to get this player or these players or to make this deal? But so we're looking at, we just explored one side of a potential deal, like we've covered on the last two episodes, where we talked about Frank Vetrano, rumored, like I said, as to how much credit should we give to this rumor that came from a very, like I said, I'm not familiar with this person that this Twitter account claims to be they are. If it's a bunch of BS, then whatever. But still, I mean, because it does sound a little fishy when you kind of sit here and think about the what the Lightning would potentially be giving up for Frank Vetrano, uh, especially when it's really a salary dump. But at the same time, why would you give up that much for a guy that's essentially going to be a rental? And that's really where we start off the conversation. Really, when we're talking about why is there pushback, why should the Lightning stay away from a deal like this, and that's really where you start. And I think that Julien Brisebois is very well aware in any trade situation going forward that he's not going to overstretch. He's not going to overpay by any means. Sometimes you could get away with that, and it works out working in your favor. But as we all know, and as we'll all remember for quite some time, the deal that was made not too long ago for Tanner Jeannot and the Nashville Predators, where really the Lightning essentially got fleeced. And a lot of it had to do, I'm not going to sit here and say that the Lightning thought that highly of Tanner Jeannot. No, it was more so Julien Brisebois, I think, waited too long to pull the trigger on a deal. And then he had to really just be overly aggressive for a player, really just to get a name. And obviously it hadn't worked out in Tampa Bay for Jeannot, and now he's in LA. But the other reasoning to not make a deal like this, whether it be for Vetrano solely or for Vetrano and Zegras, is really like what I said. You're getting a guy in Vetrano. Yes, he's going to be 31, 32 this season. He's coming off a 37 goal season, which is phenomenal. But there is a part of me with that, and I hate making this argument for any guy, especially when they're coming off a season in which they were as successful as he was. Sometimes with certain players, you have to kind of look at the situation that they were in. You look at Vetrano's, he was in Anaheim. Really not a good situation out there for them. They're a young team that is just struggling to figure it out. And now they're talking about, or they have really been talking about moving Gibson for quite some time. And it looks like they're just trying to move everybody that has any worth in order to I guess they're just going to continue rebuilding, which is, in today's NHL, really rebuild shouldn't really take that long. Look at Detroit. As long as they're done the right way, I think really is the other part of that. The other side of that with Vetrano is, is he a good fit for this Lightning team? When you think about it, especially, with his contract being up after this year, we all got so excited about Anthony Duclair. Obviously, it was great. He played phenomenally while he was in Tampa Bay. And then, he was gone. That was it. And I think that's part of it too. I wonder how much conversation there was with Duclair. Because like we said from the onset, when he had his player exit interview, it sounded like he was very clear about not coming back and had zero interest in doing so. And now you have to kind of look at like any potential player that you bring in, whether it be this summer or the trade deadline. Especially if you're in the middle of it and you think you really have a chance in winning, or at least going deep into the playoffs. I still think with the Lightning, with the lack there of resources at their disposal, in trades, in draft picks as well as prospects, I don't think they should really be in the business of going out there and getting guys that could potentially be gone in 6 months. And I think that really when you look at a guy like Vetrano, on paper, at least the stats make sense and would be a good fit. But at the same time, really, especially you want him to come in and have a good season, but in the same breath, what is really stopping him from having a good season skipping town and then going somewhere else, and now the Lightning are kind of back to square one once again with less resources. And I think that's really something that a lot of Lightning fans, as well as I'm sure the Lightning should, or at least do have in the back of their minds when they're talking about potential trades. And I think that really with Zegras, with that whole conversation, I really think that it hasn't been a fit out there in Anaheim, and a lot of you made good points, absolutely, in the comments section, that Anaheim is going to want a lot for him, and rightfully so. He was the face of their franchise, or I guess still is. I don't follow Anaheim as closely as maybe some other people do, given that they're on the West Coast, but at that same breath, he hasn't been kind of like that guy. I feel like he hasn't been living up to the hype. Obviously I don't know where you want to compare him to where, the expectations are with like a guy like Connor Bedard. But there's also a situation there and a conversation to be had where you could say, the possibility of overpaying for a guy like that who really just, I still feel like hasn't found his niche completely in the league. How much are you willing to gamble on a guy like that? So I get that too, and I get that hesitation as well. And that's why I think there's a lot of pushback from Lightning fans in general, just about this whole conversation that we are having right now. So let me know in the comments section below. I mean, yeah, it's, like I think I said it in the article I wrote last week, or I even may have even said it on the show. Both organizations, even if this deal is happening, nobody should be in any rush for this to happen. It seems as though a lot of teams and people around the league are just chilling right now. And like I said, at the same time, kind of just sizing each other up and waiting for one of them to kind of just make the first move, really. And that's what it is. So let me know in the comments section below on that. So coming up in just a little bit, we're going to switch gears real quick to wrap things up with some discussion on the captaincy for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now that Steven Stamkos has left Tampa Bay, now we could turn our focus as to who should be the next Lightning player to wear the C in Tampa Bay. So before we grab that topic, we're just going to talk about our last sponsor on today's show, and that is our friends over at eBay Motors. Now, passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance: superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So wrapping things up real quick on the show, just want to remind you, go ahead and follow us on our social media pages at LO_Lightning on Twitter, as well as LockedOn_Lightning on Instagram. You go ahead and follow me on Twitter at DankyDank, DENKYD8NK. Just to address a post that we put up on our Twitter page and Instagram page earlier today. There was a funny post going around. I guess it's fake, but still nonetheless humorous. It was an edited photo of a new Steven Stamkos jersey in Nashville. It was misspelled on the lettering in the back, Stamko, and a few people on our Twitter page have pointed out that it was fake or doctored or whatever. I mean, we found someone actually sent that to the account, and we just posted it because we thought it was funny, regardless if it was fake or not. But still, And in our post would have never have happened if it was in Tampa. And it's true. We would never even be having this conversation if he just would have stayed in Tampa Bay and not tried to play the victim afterwards. But now that he is gone, and I am officially moving on from Steven Stamkos, and I think we all should, or at least come opening night, that's really the attitude that everybody should have. That was a fun time. We all had a great time watching it unfold. We were all upset when he left and how he acted afterwards. Okay, but now let's not try and hold all the players on this team responsible and try to live up to what he provided this team during his time here. And I think that now that is going to be more important really for whoever wears the C, whether it be this season, midway through the season. I don't know when the Lightning really plan on doing all of that. Maybe they'll have some time pass just to kind of out of respect for him instead of just picking a new captain right away. I don't know. It's every franchise handles these things differently, and who knows how the Lightning will choose to address this. But it seems like old indications, and just as well as common sense, that Victor Hedman will probably be the next captain of the Tampa Bay Lightning, which I'm sure it's a no-brainer for everybody. I think we'd all agree. Not only is he the most logical choice, he is obviously the second most senior player on this team after Stamkos, so that makes perfect sense there. And you have just seen during his time as an alternate captain just the respect that he has commanded, especially times when Stamkos was out. We saw it during the 2020 Stanley Cup run. He was essentially the captain on that team because Stamkos was hurt pretty much throughout that entire playoff run. And so, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have any issue with that. Now, the only drawback to that is that now you're bringing a guy into the main focus of the leadership role where essentially the clock is ticking. It's not like a situation where you give a young player the captain's lettering and now you get to enjoy it for the next 15, 16 years like we did with Steven Stamkos. No, like Hedman is nearing his mid-30s with him, given just how much wear and tear he has had to endure throughout the entirety of his career. Most likely, I would be shocked almost to a certain degree. He is not going to be playing at 40 years old. If he does, that's great. So that gives us at least maybe 5-6 years before he hangs it up. My counter argument for him being captain would be, why don't we go or at least keep it in the same theme of captains and at least have a guy that's going to be there after Hedman, that is going to be around after Hedman. Other options would be Nikita Kucherov. He's a little on the younger side. I wouldn't be opposed to maybe Braden Point. Outside of those group of players, there really isn't someone here where I feel comfortable that they could have that role on this team where all eyes are on them and that wouldn't mess with their head even a little bit. Maybe the only guy that I maybe would have liked outside of those group of guys would have been McDonough. He's been a captain before, even though it was very brief in New York. He knows what it is and what it means to wear that letter on his sweater. So there's that as well. I mean, if you want to go in that direction, even though you're still not going to have much time with him. I mean, he's very much almost in his mid-30s too as well, and he's had an extensive history of injuries, so his clock may even be running out even sooner than Hedman's in that regard. But other than that, I mean, you look at the rest of the team, and I don't, like I said, I don't really see a player that really could rise to the occasion, or will technically not only rise to the occasion, but will also be here long enough to do that, to where it will mean something significantly in like 15 years, like I said. And that's just the difficult thing about choosing a captain, especially when the previous one was just so monumental in terms of when you think about the identity of this team, and how closely they were associated with the Lightning. You know, when you think of the Lightning logo for the last 15 years, I think a lot of people, and this is my unbiased opinion, you really think about, Steven Stamkos. So I think, it'll probably be Hedman, most likely, which I don't have any issue with. Second choice would be Kucherov, and 2B would probably be Point. Wild card would maybe be Cirelli. I mean, that's very unlikely, but stranger things have happened. So let me know in the comments below, outside of Hedman, who would you feel most comfortable with being the next captain of the Tampa Bay Lightning? Let me know in the comments below. And on the next episode, we'll be continuing our 2004 look back on the Stanley Cup playoff run for the Lightning, as we will be looking at Game 3 of the 2004 Eastern Conference quarterfinal against the New York Islanders, in which the series is currently tied last time we left off at it, as the Lightning will be heading up to New York after splitting the first 2 games of the series at the St. Pete's Forum. So in the meantime, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.